So you're saying they should have picked up HooXi?
I honestly think, okay, so HooXi IGL, Twistzz backs to
Not
phase
as a
rolls.
fragger, obviously.
No,
as an
obviously,
IGL,
yeah.
yeah.
But if you put Twistzz in phase rolls, NAF is like the anchor lurker, and then like I don't know. I mean, you could even cut YEKINDAR as well. I don't mind.
Liquid fans, come here. We have a new show. Harry, myself, a guest, sometimes, maybe not all the time, but we're going to be doing a deep dive into a single team, a player, a topic, a little stats versus eye test from the stats man himself. Maybe our guests might be a little more stats focused. Maybe they're going to be a little more eye test focused and, demo Hoover, as Harry likes to say. This episode, we're diving into the community sentiment around Liquid and what their results have been like. They've been struggling with YEKINDAR and Ultimate. They just went out of last World Final in last place. This episode was done actually before they played at the World Final. But generally, the same trends happened here. We had issues between YEKINDAR and Ultimate. Those struggles continued. But we also dive into, Twistzz in-game leading and how that's unfolding so far. And our guest this time is going to be Vu. He has a lot to say about Ultimate. There's a video that he put out on YouTube that you can check out. But as a whole, before we get into the actual discussion with Vu, we're going to break down some of the general, stats and what the positions are, what the roles are, and just how, Liquid have been doing recently. So I'll give it to Harry because he, as you all know, is the stats man for HLTV. So take it away, Harry.
Yeah, it's good to start something like this. We wanted to for a while. But yeah, without further ado, I've prepared a very high production PowerPoint. Episode 1, we've got all the big budget. It's going great. First one, just quickly for a recap of their results with this roster, right? We all got a bit excited when they beat gla1ve, but it does seem like they do have a bit of a glass ceiling overall. Like that's kind of why we're doing this episode. It's kind of the premise is what's stopping them breaking this glass ceiling, because they don't really make playoffs. They've only made playoffs at Pro League, and it's Pro League. We don't need to talk about why Pro League is different to the Cologne and the Rio and the World Final that we've just seen. And the trends did continue. But before we get into why we think they have this glass ceiling, I think it's important to kind of set out the context of the team, and that is, it's role cell time. This is the roles. So they have kind of it's not a conventional team structure because Twistzz is a star player IGL is the main thing. So this is T side on Anubis, which is pretty much their best map consistently. So NAF is the lurker over this boy over here. He's amazing at what he does. We're not going to talk about NAF that much because he's basically just good. He's solid. JKS, the recent signing, we will touch on him. But the real point of interest is in the map control pack between YEKINDAR, who is obviously underperforming heavily. We need to talk about why that is, whether it's actually entirely his fault. And then we've got Twistzz as well. And as an IGL, obviously you can talk about a lack of options in the market, and we will talk about things like that as well. But the brunt of it is their T-side win rate is quite poor. And that ultimately is down to, a lot of soft players have tried IGLing and not a lot have stuck to it. And Twistzz maybe is becoming one of those players. And then you've got Ultimate, who seems, he seemed like a very genius signing at the time. Like we were all thinking this is Moneyball 101. They've plucked someone out of nowhere. This is crazy. But we're going to get into it. He's a bit too aggressive, and he's having to change his game on the fly in tier 1 against the very best players. And that's difficult. And then CT side, the roles are the same. Pretty much you have NAF and JKS on the extremities, which is what they want to do. It's what they've always done. YEKINDAR in some very important rotator spots, and Twistzz as the other rotator. So the roles make sense on paper. That's not really something we can go into too much. What we're actually going to talk about more is the balance of players. And for that, there's this. And yes, this graph is beautiful. I know, you're already typing it. This is amazing. I know it is. And here you have the problem with Liquid, in my opinion, and we'll see if our guest agrees later. But my opinion on Liquid is they've got too many passive riflers. Okay, so you have NAF, Twistzz, and JKS. They're all late round players, right? So their solution to that was YEKINDAR, obviously very aggressive, but the only aggressive rifler in this team, realistically. And then you have Ultimate as this super aggressive AWPer. And will this patch a gap in the passive rifling? Because you just, generally teams have two aggressive riflers, right? You have JL and Ema, and then Bit and Alexi are more passive, more supportive. That's how teams work. And it's the same here, right? Most teams, if you plot on this chart, have someone in this box. This box is the entry fraggers who generally get traded more than they are trading. Liquid have JKS and NAF, who are allergic to entry fragging. They've got Twistzz, who will do whatever the team needs, but, you know, the team doesn't need Twistzz to entry frag, even though he does it the most on this team. He's the one whose deaths are traded the most on this team. YEKINDAR, who's supposed to be this entry fragger, actually scores very badly in traded deaths. And we're going to talk about why that is, but this is not where you expect someone who on the eye test is entering into bomb sites. So this means he's not being traded or he's bad at getting traded. And that's something we need to talk about. And there's also this, which is the T-side win rate. This is the top 20 teams last 3 months. They're basically complexity level, Falcons level. I mean, they're not quite as bad as Falcons because, well, I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But here's Liquid, third worst in the top 20. And they're obviously...
Is this post-World Final or pre-World Final?
So this is post-World Final. So I think it's not changed much though. It was about the same before. They've pretty much stayed there. I think World Final was maybe 43%. So here's Liquid, not doing great on T-side. We need to talk about why that is, whether it's Twistz's fault, whether it's not Twistz's fault. And then the two kind of factors on the team, right? So, YEKINDAR, and this is another beautiful graphic. I will copyright this. No one copy this. No one copy this, because you know what HLTV do if you copy our stuff, okay? So, here's YEKINDAR at the start of Liquid. Straight to jail. Here's Nitro, IGLing. It's all going great. They're second at 3 events in a row. Everyone's kind of gassing them up. But Nitro leaves, Elige leaves, YEKINDAR becomes IGL. Rainwaker was the original ultimate, but just didn't have the honeymoon. He's gone. Patsy's gone. So this is when the drop-off really starts. And YEKINDAR stops being this kind of top 20 aggressive player who can turn games in their heads. This is a long time ago now. This is a year ago, okay? When YEKINDAR stops being the star player of Liquid. I know there's a drop-off here, but the real drop-off is when he becomes IGL. And then at the start of the KDN era, they all had 1.2 ratings, playing online, lots of qualifiers. It really wasn't sustainable. At LANs, he'd still be down here. So I'm just some context. We're not flaming. This is just context. SnapTap gets introduced, and there's a little bump. Good for you, YEKINDAR. SnapTap's now gone, and he's back here.
Now you are flaming, though.
Now I am flaming. Because this is a previous top 20 player on a huge salary, and we need to work out why this is. Is this the structure of the team, or is this YEKINDAR himself? And, well, I know my opinion on it. You'll have to see the episode for Note's opinion on it, but he is less based than me, put it that way. Other problem on the team, and this is proper YouTube. This is proper YouTube now, because we've got 6 red arrows. And what the arrows are pointing at is how ridiculously aggressive Ultimate is. Because Ultimate, right, the average AWPer on CT side, he's fairly aggressive because it's an AWP. If 5v4s are important, AWP's the best weapon to get a 5v4. It's simple, right? Wonderful, even. This is data from Skybox Edge, which is great, by the way. And even wonderful, on CT side, he's about 30%. Ultimate is special because on CT side, he's 36% when he has an AWP. So this is gun rounds where Ultimate has an AWP. He's in a first duel 36% of rounds on CT side. And on T side, it's 25%. Some AWPers are about 4% on T side. Jame, supportive AWPers, 4%. Average AWPer, 12%. Ultimate, 25%. So this guy is entry fragging with an AWP. He is pushing for openers on CT side. He is ultra, ultra aggressive. And we saw that work, and now we've seen that not work. And this is why we got Vu on, because I think Vu did some pretty good demo reviews of Ultimate and came to similar conclusions. And I think these are the topics we get into. So hopefully this is a good little primer of the statistical factors behind this, because as we can see, there's you want to be positive about Liquid because it's better than the KDN iteration, right? But there is this glass ceiling on the team, and I think we really need to, get into it, explore it, and see if all my numbers mean anything at all. Because I have been told they don't quite often, so we'll have to see, won't we?
Well, we started this because Vu, you put out a video talking about Ultimate's little drop off recently. So just starting with that, let's get into that and just some of your thoughts after getting into the demos and what you kind of saw after that video.
Okay, so the most notable thing on that video is that every comment is like, "Can he not have one bad map? Is he not allowed one bad map? What?" It's 2 bad events he had in a row. And I think if you look at the demos, I actually think it's a fundamental problem that he goes aggressive way too often. If you look at the top oppers, like if you look at Monacy, he could go fucking aggressive every round of an entire series and he would just get kills constantly. But you can't do that because the op is like a strategic weapon. And I don't know how in depth we want to get here, but like one of the things that you do with the op is that it protects your riflers. So if your opponents don't know where the op is, like why do you not want to walk into like, I don't know, A on cash or what, like B on dust 2 or like mid on dust, all these angles, you don't want to walk into them, not because you don't want to run into a rifler, it's because you don't want to run into an opper that could just be sitting there and just kill you. But if your opper is aggressive every round, then your opponents can just wait and then know where you're gonna be, and know where your opper is, and then they can play around the map accordingly, and they don't have to be worried about an op just being posted up in a bunch of different angles, and they can play a lot more loose throughout the map, and they can isolate and target different players really effectively. And whenever I look at Ultimate, he's just like, every time he has an op, he goes for 1 of 4 aggressive plays, and almost never plays passive. And then that's not including all the times he misses like easy shots, but that's I think you're allowed to have that. I think strategically they're not implementing Ultimate correctly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this is the thing with a lot of like tier 2 AWPers maybe. Like even like when Device came back, he said he watched like loads of Afro demos to find new openings and stuff, right? Like it was the kind of aggressive AWPer is something that everyone wants to be it because it's an expensive gun, right? You need to, like an opening kill is the easiest way to win a round. Like a 5v4, you just should win that. So when Ultimate came in, but you can just see these tier 2 players, they don't have that depth. I think you're right. I think they're not got enough depth in the way they do their openings because someone like Monacy, like I actually looked at it, like someone like Monacy isn't actually above average in terms of aggression for like opening attempts when he has an AWP. Like that's not something, and like when you think of him as aggressive, but it's the rounds where he is passive, like you're saying. It's the rounds where, you know, he's setting up a rifler and I think also the thing with Ultimate is he is so raw to tier 1, and we've seen it quite a lot with AWPers who are aggressive. I think it's much easier to be a passive AWPer to adapt to tier 1 than to be an aggressive AWPer because you're not used to the level of scrutiny that these teams can do on you. And it's only taken, like 3 events before there's enough data, enough demos that everyone just is so aware of all these peaks that he used to rely on.
Is that a hot take that passive oppers change, like adapt more effectively? Intuitively, I would think the opposite.
I mean, I think initially,
do we have examples?
Aggression? Yeah. Because I would say someone like Headtrick, right? Very passive, and you look at him over like a longer time period in NIP, and it was okay, they wanted someone who's more aggressive because he just wasn't, like, it wasn't worth the money for him to just sit and hold angles around. But then someone like Wrinkle came in, and I think he's had a very similar trajectory to Ultimate in that he first turns up, he's crazy mechanically, he goes for these crazy peaks, and he's very successful in these opening duels, like especially on CT side. And then 3 months later, you're not talking about him as some huge prospect anymore. Like, he's not carrying an IP past anywhere. They're like losing to full USBs and things instead, right? So it's is
that
different.
A Wrinkle thing or an NIP thing though?
Well, that's the whole team.
It's
I think it's the whole team. But this is the thing with Wrinkle is it's like Ultimate. You can't do this aggression in tier 1 unless it's calculated and it's unpredictable. You can't just keep doing it every time. Like, even Device was super aggressive when he first came back, using all these openings he'd watched on demos and stuff, and now he's like average again. Like, he's dropped down as well. So it's just, I just generally think aggressive AWPing, like, if the best players in the world with the best mechanics don't do it, then why are you trying it? Like, even if it's your natural part of the game. And I think just to pivot a little bit, I think they needed Ultimate to fix their riflers' lack of aggression. Like, Twistzz even talked about this, right? Like, their riflers tend to be quite passive, and using an AWPer to fix that is just not the way I think like team building wise, I don't think it's really the way to go. I don't think you can rely on a super aggressive AWPer to cover up the fact that all your riflers want to be third in. Like, I just don't think
that's where I was going to go next. But quickly, what Ultimate's trajectory right now reminds me of is when Poison first came into the tier 1 scene, because it was really similar. He was a very aggressive opper. He was getting a lot of, like, he was taking a lot of space and staying in angles that, you know, in tier 2, tier 3, you wouldn't get punished for staying in or for re-peeking in. You'd get away with a lot more. Or just repeatedly going for similar plays. And then, you know, he had insane ratings, insane performances the first 1 or 2 events that he played in. But then after, I don't know, 4 or 5 events in, he was very similar. His rating dropped, his impact dropped. It was really hard for him to have the same kind of impact. And it's very similar trajectory to what we're seeing here. But as you were going to pivot a little, Harry, I wanted you to kind of walk through the roles on the team, because that is something that I saw as an issue when I was looking at Ultimate here, because you have the passive players between JKS, NAF, and then Twistzz is like somewhere in the middle, you know? But when you have YEKINDAR taking most of the space as a rifler and your opper is the next one who has to constantly be aggressive, you're going to have a glaring hole there. So I wanted you to kind of walk through the roles a little bit and kind of, I guess, your Statsman roles perspective on, you know, what's going wrong on that end for Liquid.
Yeah, time to go full role cell, as everyone says. But it's so I think there's lots of ways to build a team, right? But I think the really interesting thing with Liquid is because Twistzz is IGL, like the rifle, like constellation almost just has to be very different to other teams. Like it's almost like it makes sense they had an AWP in IGL before because he wants to play in these like the pack rifle roles, but he wants to be the trade fragger. So it's the Stown role, basically, from that Prime Heroic team. Like, that's what he wants. He wants to be second in, behind an actual entry. But because you don't have, so YEKINDAR becomes this kind of IGL entry in the team. So you have very, very defined roles in Liquid of NAF and JKS, of course, or like lurkers. They'll always pick up the extremities on every map. And then Twistzz is in the map control pack and often trying to trade YEKINDAR. And YEKINDAR's just this raw entry, like literal 2015 entry. If they're going on a bomb site and YEKINDAR's alive, he's the one who has to jump around the corner. And I think it's that Ultimate is also in that pack, and when he has a rifle, he's literally more aggressive than the others. Like, he's not one of these people who, like a lot of the other AWPers I check the stats of, and when they have an AWP, they're like still quite aggressive, and then they're on a rifle and they have literally like 4% opening attempts on T side. Like, I think this was a Jame thing, an R Frost, like even Torji just doesn't, like on T side, if they don't have an AWP, they're just throwing flashbangs. They are just full support. And Ultimate is not like that. He is still aggressive. He's still, you know, I think it was like about 16, 17%, which for an AWPer is a lot. So they have this thing where the roles make sense. Everyone's happy. You want YEKINDAR to be the space taker on like places like Banana or something. You want Twistzz to be trade fragging second into a bomb site because he's incredible at that. He always has been. And then you have 2 lurkers, and well, you need 2 lurkers. But then, so like individually it makes sense, and then you add it up and you're like, well, this is not really where CS has gone. Like, CS has gone into very fluid riflers. Like someone like a team like Na'Vi, they have basically 3 players who all could be aggressive lurkers in a past version of the game. Like even Ema, like he ends up lurking a lot after taking map control. And Liquid, I think they have too many players who want to be alive late round, and that just leads them to weird situations. I think if you have JKS and you kind of have an aggressive lurker there instead, then the balance is much better. Because like you said, Twistzz is this half and half player. He's always been able to go aggressive, but having him bomb site entry is just not what you need at all. And even YEKINDAR is not a true bomb site entry in the way that like a traditional IGL would be. Like maybe that's part of why his stats have dropped off, is because he's having to do that. But his traded deaths percentage is not high. Like it's like 20%. Like HooXi had like 30 plus, right? He's not. So either he's still doing space taking on his own. I don't know, maybe this is something more for demos to show you, but
so HooXi is a better entry than YEKINDAR. Is that your take?
Well, it's a different thing, right? It's a different thing because YEKINDAR has to be that guy when they do bomb site entries, but also because he's so aggressive early round, he's dead a lot. And I think the thing with Liquid is you get into the mid round, late round, and they're just tripping over each other's toes because YEKINDAR's probably dead. And they just can't get these XQs right. Twistzz is having to entry too much. And I just think NAF and JKS are too similar. Like, ultimately, that's where the role competition comes down to, is these are the same types of passive lurker. And I think that's part of why JKS maybe hasn't quite had the impact, because NAF is just a better version of JKS, realistically.
So you're saying they should have picked up HooXi?
I honestly think, okay, so HooXi IGL, Twistzz backs the phase rolls.
Not as a fragger, obviously.
No, well, obviously,
yeah.
But if you put Twistzz in phase rolls, NAF is like the anchor lurker, and then, like, I don't know. I mean, you can even cut YEKINDAR as well. I don't mind. But I think, yes, I think having a more traditional IGL would increase YEKINDAR's performance as well. I think this type of structure, it worked for Heroic because Stown could bait and frag and bait and bait and more bait, and then that was fine. But like, this is just not where CS has gone, and I don't think it plays to Twistzz benefit, because Twistzz on T side, like, his ratings dropped off big time as well. Like, it wasn't even that good at the start of the year, but it's below 1 now since he became IGL. Actually on LAN, I think it's like 0.99 exactly. And this is like Twistzz, like, you still watch him, he still got it. He's just being put in bad positions, and that is making them a worse team than if they were more traditional. Like, I think their T sides overall, like, we'll get to it, but overall they're just not clicking. And I think a lot of it is, it's not a role thing because these players are good in their positions. It's an actual mid-round issue of they trip up over each other, and they all just tend to be a bit too passive, even Twistzz.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if Note wanted to say something. I should.
No, I was gonna ask if you had a feeling on that, because there's
No. I think they're really. I think I agree too much in that. I think their problem seems this. Someone from Liquid's gonna watch this and be like, "Boo, you're a fucking idiot." But this is my opinion. Okay, I think that the problem is an overarching strategic problem, in that the same thing that is the problem with Ultimate, in that he goes aggressive too often. He's not allowing for protection for his other teammates, so that when I watched, I think it was against FaZe their last time playing Anubis, or no, it was Vitality, I think, when they played Anubis. Basically what it looked like is that on T side, they were just waiting for Ultimate to get aggressive. They see him get aggressive. They just don't give that pick up. That's their whole, like, we're just not going to die to Ultimate when he gets aggressive, and we're just going to react elsewhere on the map. And it worked fucking flawlessly, like, very consistently. And because he's always getting aggressive, well, if he's not aggressive on B and he's not aggressive on A, then you know he's mid, and you can just, like, double nade him, or you can molly him out, and you can absolutely destroy him. And I think that's, to Nero's point, that's why most oppers, even the ones, like, if m0NESY isn't going aggressive more than X% of the time, no other opper in the world should be going aggressive that often in tier 1, because m0NESY is literally just Kenny S but better. He could go aggressive every round if he wanted to, but strategically it doesn't work. And I think the same exact thing goes for YEKINDAR. He goes aggressive way too often. Teams can just wait for the mistake to happen, and he's just going to int into you. And it's just, there's no protection for these plays, because they seem to want to lean into how their individuals like to play, and do kind of like, maybe that's why they clash with Cadian, right? Like, they want to lean into how the individuals like to play, and I don't think you can do that strategically. And especially when I watch, like, Liquid against Na'Vi, they're so outclassed. Like, from a strategical standpoint, it's crazy, and it almost feels like this is just going off of the specific map 3 against Na'Vi. It was like Na'Vi would go for the run boost lane on Ancient, and they would get a kill, and then the next 3 rounds, Liquid is like hard countering that play. And then, okay, well, they're not, haven't gone for it for a while, and they stop, and they're like a little weaker on it, and then Na'Vi go for it again, get a kill, and then they're hard countering it again. It's like, this is just strategically, from a top-down perspective, I just don't think that they have a great plan. Like, it just seems very discoordinated. And when I thought of Twistzz going to IGL, the only problem I had with Twistzz going to IGL, other than the fragging problem, is that if he's going to IGL, he must think that the way that they're playing strategically is good, and he's just going to continue that. And I think that's the biggest problem with Liquid that needs to change if they want to be able to beat top teams, because they can just dumpster worse teams because they have so much individual skill. It's the teams above them that they actually have to play, better to beat.
I did want to talk more about Twistzz IGL and his system, because the thing is, you say that, but I don't think his actual strategy in terms of like the way he calls is bad, but I do think that he focuses a lot on, like not necessarily the set strats, but calling out of defaults and the couple of plays that they have. And to be fair, they did have like a pretty packed schedule initially, and he said he had to like create his playbook after his wedding in like 3 days or something. But after this point, I feel like you should have something more established. The way I kind of want to tie that in though is when you have Twistzz calling and you have someone who's not that experienced as a primary in-game leader, and he's not done it his whole career, you need your secondary caller to kind of also provide that backbone and structure to help in those mid rounds. And when you have someone like YEKINDAR who's individually struggling and making all of these plays that are ultra aggressive and not working, it's really hard to call around that, at least in my opinion, because like, how are you going to adapt mid round when, let's say you're in a 4v4 on Ancient and YEKINDAR gets a single flash out of Cave, dies, and you have one, like, it's not a 3v4, even if it was a 5v4, I've seen that happen a few times. So, like, how do you adapt to stuff like that when your secondary caller is, like, trying to make these plays and get that information, but A, it doesn't work out individually, but also you don't have the experience structure around him to actually build up through this calling throughout series? Because also, when I was in Rio and I was watching the FaZe game, I actually went and stood outside and tried to listen to them calling. Or no, it was actually the Navi game. And I listened to the timeouts that Blade and Myther took. And it was really interesting because like Myther provides actually a lot of insight. And he was like, the kind of adaptations he was giving and the way he was talking to try and, get the team back in, that actually inspires some confidence, but you don't have that to rely on more than 3 times a game. So where is that coming from for Liquid?
You want to go on this?
Yeah. So it's not that I don't think, like, I think when I think of like the way Blade does things, it seems to be like heavily percentage based. Whereas I think the problem I have with Liquid is that they're doing the Kerrigan style of calling, if I think about it, which is like, when you watch Kerrigan, the reason a lot of people really like Kerrigan, and myself included, is that you can see the adjustments mid-game. You can see, like, they ran a default, and then the second time they ran the default, they did a slight delay here, they did an adjustment here. It's, like, constant adjustments, and you can see how the game is being built out in a coordinated way. I think Blade does that with, like, game plans, and I think you can do that if you're Liquid, if you're good enough as an IGL and if you're experienced enough. And I think Twistzz could get there, but when it comes to IGLing, there's a lot of people that I think could be good IGLs, but you need to build out, like, it's not only just the playbook, right? It's like, how do I call out from these scenarios, like these 4v3s, these 3v2s? What are my comfort calls? What do I know works? When you have to be thinking about that in the middle of the game, which is probably what you have to do if you're ever a new IGL, you're gonna make mistakes, and your fragging is gonna go down, and you're gonna be more readable because you're gonna have these tendencies that you're just trying to iron out, right? So it makes sense that Myther is like having a lot of good insight in the middle of the game because you can see what's going wrong and try and adjust to it. Whereas I think it's the out of game stuff, if I'm again probably reading into it too much, but it's like the out of game, like, overarching strategy that I think is somewhat missing. But I think there's a fair point that, there are 3 days to build your structure. I think if they come back and they have the same problems, that's where it's a serious concern. And then my other question is, like, how much of these plays from YEKINDAR are YEKINDAR wants to do them, or how much are YEKINDAR's being called to do them? And I feel like it's hard to separate because when you have Twistzz go IGLing, it seems like kind of an admission that they like the way he's doing things. So, is that a YEKINDAR problem or is that a Liquid problem? I don't know if it's clear what the answer is there.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with this is obviously all the Cadian stuff and the way they reacted to that kind of system of it being very structured, right? Like, Cadian would be the micromanager because he has this genius mid-round call or something. And they all wanted to be able to use more of the set strats that YEKINDAR and Twistzz were making. So this is this idea that they only had 3 days to create a system or whatever. Well, Twistzz and YEKINDAR have been making this system since like March or something, realistically, because that's when it was already quite clear that KD was on his way out. I think they've had control of the team for a very long time. I think there's been enough time for there to be like a concrete system in that way. I think there's, yeah, like you're saying that like these issues that are there, I think they have actually had time, to be honest. I think they're trying to do the kind of template international team style that is the kind of Karrigan, but like we've seen when they play FaZe, the issue with that is you're not a better version of Karrigan. Karrigan has, like, there's no point trying to be a budget FaZe, and they just don't have the profiles for it as well. Like, they don't have the mid-round playmakers in a way that FaZe always did, even though Rops and Brokey would consider passive generally. Like, mid-round, they're not passive. They can turn it on when they want to. They can be unpredictable. I think Liquid's system is based around individuals, like you said. It's based around YEKINDAR getting the right mid-round read on when to walk through, connect on Anubis or something, right? Or up Banana or whatever. It's up to the individuals to know enough about the opposition to make plays themselves. And JKS and NAF are just not those types of players to actually activate as much in the mid-round for a system that is designed around individuals with the odd set play that they know works from practice. Because that is the kind of system that seems to be visible, is that it is based on, because all teams are, like, to an extent, all teams are. Like, the kind of micromanaging KD and Heroic style has gone out of fashion big time. It's just, we're talking about Liquid trying to break into the top 5, right? And are there individuals as good as the top 5? Like, maybe some of them, you could say so. Like, I think Twistzz and NAF have had good years, but realistically, it's not going to be firepower that pushes them over the edge, I think. Now Ultima has come back down to more of an average. I don't think their firepower is good enough to elevate them. I think maybe the system has to be tweaked a little bit to give these players more advantageous duels more often.
I disagree a bit on your point of saying that they had time since March to make their strat book, because they're not practicing with 4 people and then Cadian's just sitting there in a back room, not on the server, and it's kind of hard to establish that when he's your captain still, regardless of the issues. And I mean, from what I've heard, there's a lot that happened behind the scenes for Liquid that caused a lot of issues. So I don't think that, Twistzz and YEKINDAR were there making their strat book in private and just, not letting Cadian call or something.
No, I don't think they weren't letting Cadian call. I don't think they weren't letting Cadian call. I think Zeus even said it himself, that they were doing a lot of the prep, a lot of the game plans. They were doing a lot of it already. And I think that they know how each other see the game. I think they have come into it now. And I think they're going to have a bootcamp before the major, right? But it's in Singapore. So maybe that is an issue of having enough time to get the system up to scratch. But realistically, I don't think they're gonna solve the game in an extra week of bootcamp. I think this is generally, they've had long enough to know how they want to play. You can learn that during officials too. You can mold your style during officials just as well as practice. There's been enough time to adapt, to tweak. I know the travel's hard. Of course the travel's hard, but the actual way you see the game isn't going to change drastically just because you have a week of bootcamp. I don't think. But
is a week of bootcamp enough to get them over the hump except the last time they played Liquid, right? All these games are close. They brought Na'Vi 13-11 on Ancient, although maybe, I don't know if it should have been that close, right? FaZe, actually the second last time they played FaZe, they got screwed too. But they were close a couple times, right? They're pretty close to a lot of these teams. It's not like they're getting blown out, I think we are being a little doomer pilled, kind of.
That's what I was going to move to next. I was going to ask, are we being too harsh on this team, considering that this iteration of the lineup has really only been around since July, and we have Twistzz in-game leading, and the results are really not that bad. Sure, they only made playoffs at EPL, but considering the teams they've lost to at all of their events, they're all basically top 5 teams. Or, FaZe has kind of been up and down out of there, but, you have the Karrigan angle there, and there's, a little bit of, Twistzz being the next Karrigan prodigy or whatever. But I feel like, at least from the way I've seen other people discuss this, it does seem like people are being a little overly harsh considering the results and how much time they've had together. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. I think that But there's just this kind of gatekeeper element of their team. I think that their struggles with top 5 teams happen for a reason, I think. And when you're looking at it, it's maybe okay. If you did line up the world ranking in July, maybe this is where they would sit as kind of this gatekeeper team outside the top 5. I think they're pretty much at expectations. I think they're pretty much delivering how I thought they would when I saw these transfers. Now Ultimate's cooled off a little bit, I think. I think they're literally exactly where I would put them. And the question for Liquid is, they're one of the biggest orgs. They're one of the best paying orgs. And the question is whether that is good enough, even with all those, like valid reasons that Twistzz is new to IGLing and blah, blah, blah. But, okay, put it this way. Do you think Twistzz IGLing is something that needs time, or do you think it's just going to be the latest case of a long line of star players just switching back as soon as... Because I think it's a case of they looked at the IGL market and didn't fancy anyone. Because this is always what it is. Because if an IGL is available that they think that they actually respect, they will take it, in my opinion. I think the problem was they look at it and there's only like 5 S-tier in-game leaders and none of them were willing to come. Like, I don't... Because obviously internally you're going to want to see it as a long-term thing. I just think this project is centered around Twistzz. Like, he's even scouting the players. He's doing everything, right? And I don't think that's a sustainable way for an org that should have ambitions on Liquid's level of getting back to the Grand Slam winning level roster. I don't think you can do that without Twistzz being one of your best players. And he already is. But I just think a more traditional system with a more traditional in-game leader is the way to get back there. And I think, yes, we're being harsh, but this is Team Liquid we're talking about. This isn't some Mickey Mouse org that can't pay his salaries. This is one of the best paid teams and some of the best paid players.
Yeah, you're also, if you look at the teams they beat, I feel like they haven't really, other than complexity, I kind of, to some extent, I write off inter-region games. Like, who have they really beat that's, like, impressive, and they beat them in an impressive way? I guess they beat Spirit, but Spirit has been, like, all over the place, right? Like, their wins, I feel like their wins haven't been that amazing. And when I've looked at teams in the past, I did a sheet on this not that long ago, actually. And it's hard to get an exact counter because there's a difference in how many events are being played, when the breaks are, but it seems like most teams do hit their peak after 2 to 3 months. And we're seeing that with Liquid. Oh, sorry, not their peak. What they do is some teams overperform. They have a honeymoon for a couple of months, and some teams underperform. But after 2 to 3 months, they're generally at their level that they stay at. And Liquid has recently been doing worse because when you look at the losses, the losses are getting more egregious, right? They're getting blown out by FaZe when they play them, right? I feel like and when you look at the games, the actual games, they look like they're not getting better. They look like they're not. When they win, it feels like it's an individual thing, So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from, like where my confidence is. It's like this just looks like when they win, it's individuals making plays, and I don't think you can break into the top 5 doing that. And they are an org that wants to be top 5. They want to be a top 3, top 1 team, right? And I think it's hard. It's hard to say. I think when it comes to Twistzz, I feel like you're either an IGL or you're not. I feel like it's so hard for players that are still really good players to transition to IGLing because you're going to lose fragging. You're going to go down, and it takes 6 months, maybe a year to like really get to a high level of IGLing. And if you just start underperforming, Twistzz is thinking in his head, if he's under a 1 rating, he's like, I could just be fucking shooting people and we'd be doing better. Like, I could just be not IGLing. Like, that's always going to creep into your mind. When you look at the guys that transition to IGLing, is there any star player that was still a star player that's really transitioned? I can't remember. Usually it's like after they fall off. Kerrigan even was like in the top 20 for a couple years, and then he fell way off, and then he was an IGL. Like,
I was going to mention that too, because you had Apex who did it, but that was past his peak period, really. But yeah,
I feel like you do it when you're bad, basically.
Yeah, you do the happy blame.
I don't hate it either, though. I don't hate it either. Because so if you go back to what Harry said about, what IGLs are actually on the market, at some point you do need a player to kind of step in and make this kind of transition, because there's only ever so many top in-game leaders. And when you have a player like Twistzz, who's played with Kerrigan for so long, who's played at the top for so long, he is kind of, I guess in a way, protecting his future as well, because it gives him way more avenues, because like Harry said, 5 in-game leaders that you could potentially pick from at like the S tier level right now, and none of them want to come. But then you go, let's say you go three years down the road, Twistzz has now given himself those kind of options as well. Let's say his individual level falls off, he has those kind of teams to pick from, right? If that is his in-game leading reaches.
Is that even
kind of
true?
level.
But is it better to have an A tier in-game leader and Twistzz be an S tier rifler rather than just reducing Twistzz?
I would have picked up
Because
HooXi straight
that's
up.
the trade. Yeah, like I think a HooXi A tier IGL-ish. I think that's fine. I think it's a better team.
So that is something I wanted to turn to, but first I did want to circle back around to the ultimate point and ask, has he been found out? Like, is this something that is improvable? Do we see him being able to redeem himself? Because when you have a player who is found out like this, you, in my opinion at least, you need the structure around it from behind to actually help him develop. For example, when you had m0NESY come into G2, he did have Swanee helping with these openings, and then he kind of took it for himself and started finding his own openings and getting developed very quickly, both by the coaching staff and by himself. The one thing that kind of stands out here for me is that Liquid as an organization hasn't really done very well with their oppers. You had Nitro, who is like their hybrid rifle op, and then you had OC come in, who obviously struggled in that lineup. You had Fallen, who was already kind of past his prime in terms of opping, and then now you have this iteration where, again, you're not really like, and then you had Kadian as well, who again obviously struggled in this team. So Liquid, as they've come through with oppers, haven't really found much success, and Twistzz playing in the old Liquid also didn't really have an opper to develop and see how that progressed. Then in FaZe you have Brokey, who kind of does insane shit. You can't really put a beat on Brokey in terms of how he's going to develop and get plays. So where is that structure to help someone like Ultimate coming from, and where do you see that going? Because that's clearly a glaring issue at the moment for them.
I was going to say, I don't think it's impossible to get him. I'll just say something quickly and then you go. I don't think it's impossible to get him to that level, because like mechanically I think he's solid enough that it's more of a unpredictability and playstyle thing than his actual mechanics. But I don't know. What do you think, V?
So the base answer is basically yes, he's been found out, like, to some extent.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of agree with that. I wanted to ask, I don't know if we should cut this out. I wanted to ask if switching to IGL actually does give you more chances on other teams, because it seems like teams are more likely to pick up a washed superstar to play non-IGL roles than they are to pick up an IGL that they don't think is the best IGL in the world. Like, it's like the JKS is getting picked up, Magisk, Dupree, all these, they're all getting picked up still. But okay, about the ultimate thing, I think they almost give them too much room. They give, like, It seems like on CT side, specifically on CT side, if Ultimate wants to go for a play, he's going for the play. It's like if Ultimate has an aggressive play he wants to go for, he's going for it, no matter what the scoreline is. I mean, I've seen a game on Dust 2 recently, maybe the one against Na'Vi, where Ultimate had he was 1-7, and he had 5 rounds with the op, and he was still going aggressive every round, and they just kept saving the op, giving it back to him, and he just kept going aggressive. And it was over and over, and I think they need someone reining him in a little bit and putting him inside of the style. And I think that's really the reason I brought up Ultimate. I think I brought him up initially, but the reason I think it's important is if Ultimate is a strong piece and they can use him strategically, I think Liquid could be a top 5 team easily. I think Ultimate is literally the most important player that they need to activate, and if he's having a good game, they're going to have a good game as a team. And it's not just that they should use him the same and they need to find a way to make sure the games are good. If they keep using him the exact way they are, he will never find consistency, because I think he has absolutely been found out. But that's not to say that he couldn't come back from it. he comes from tier 2. He has a lot of these plays. You have your comfort plays, right? And that's kind of why I think the idea of like maybe passive operas transition better, because passive operas have less like comfort plays. You when you're aggressive, you have plays that you make that work, even if they're dumb. It's just like you hit the shot fast, you know the angles, it just works really well for you. Maybe when you're passive, you're more adaptive, and so you can change all those things. But he came from tier 2. He had all his comfort plays. They had a lot of games in a row. He did them for a while. Maybe he comes out now after a little bit of time to practice, and he's got another set of comfort plays, but it has to be additionally. Like he's got, instead of having 3 plays on every map, he's got 8 plays on every map, not 3 new plays that are just going to get figured out again, right? It has to be, he has to have more of a repertoire and more ability to play passive.
Yeah, because he's just off the scale, right? Like I looked at it with using Skybox data, and he's 36% of so if it's CT side and he has an AWP, it's like a third of rounds Ultimate is involved in the opening duel, and that doesn't include like soft peaks where he, you know, like goes for a gunfight and escapes alive and doesn't kill anyone because he missed an AWP shot, right? So it's 35%. He either gets the kill or dies. That is literally like YEKINDAR overall level aggression. And yes, it's the most expensive gun. This is good. Like someone like Wonderful, if you think of as passive, is like 30%. But yeah, like Muncie, 28%. ZywOo, 24%. Like ZywOo's mega pussy with the AWP, right? So there's lots of ways to do it for Ultimate, because you don't want to get rid of the aggression. I think Liquid have had trouble, and I think maybe they've overcorrected because they've had trouble with someone like OC just became a support bot who just wasn't able to make plays. Cadian, when he has an AWP, is quite passive. Fallen the same. They've actually, Fallen's okay on CT side now, but in his Liquid tenure, like there was clearly a rifle-based team, right? And I think they've tried to adapt to that, but it's just finding that balance. Like you're right. I think they do need to rein him in a little bit, but also I'm not sure it is just him going for it. I think they are definitely pushing him to be aggressive, because that came up so often when they talked about scouting him, as they wanted this super aggressive AWPer. Like I think it's a key part of their system to offset the other riflers and still be unpredictable to opponents, is to have someone taking these duels who has a better success rate than YEKINDAR, right? Like you still want these 5v4s from somewhere, and if you're not getting them from your star rifler, well, someone who's in star rifle positions at least, if not star rifler, then your AWP is the best way to do it. But yeah, this 35%, it's too high. It's not a sustainable way to get 5v4s, I think.
But is it unpredictable when you have your AWPer aggressive all the time?
Well, that's what I mean, right? But it was unpredictable 3 months ago, when, you know, like he wasn't even on most people's radar at all, and you had like literally even my spreadsheets had like the top 100 teams on it, still didn't have Ultimate on it, right, when they signed him. So like he's pretty far down in terms of people having prepped for him. So that's just something that you have to adapt to. But I'm hoping that he's able to adapt, and he's not someone like an Afro who just, because this is what happens at Afro in Fnatic, is they signed him because he was really good at these aggressive openers, right? And then a year later, he's just a support bot again, and they all talk about how good a teammate he is when they cut him, and they're like, "Oh, he was such a good teammate," but you cut him because he wasn't killing anyone. Like that's what we don't want to happen to Ultimate. And with someone like Sampaius on the market, I think he might not have ages to prove that he can be a more of a nuanced top tier AWPer still, because that potential that was there when we first saw him being this crazy aggressive player, like that those mechanics don't disappear. It's literally just a slight tweak to playstyle, because you can still be aggressive. It's just that slight tweak back to kind of the more meta type of AWPer. And I think if you change the riflers around as well, and change the focus on rifle duels as well, then maybe Ultimate, there's less pressure on him to actually find these openers.
Yeah, maybe he feels like he needs to go for them. Just for like the viewers at home, one thing when I talked about like Ultimate, wait, we're all at home, so for everyone at home, just when you think of like the when I talked about strategically how to use an AWPer, I'll give a reasonable example. I made a video on this a while back. That Heavy God on Aeon Anubis, right, was one of the most aggressive players on Aeon Anubis, and they would start their AWPer on OG. I mean, when he was on OG, I was like scouting him. They would start their AWPer A 50% of the time. Not aggressively, he would just be A, like in some shape or form. And it's not that the Opper had to be aggressive to cover for Heavy God to be aggressive. The Opper just had to be there so that riflers couldn't just walk in and be like, well, we know Heavy God's going to be aggressive, so we're just going to walk in, we're just going to duel this guy, and we win it or we lose it, and we're going to trade on him, and he's going to get fucked. Because half the time you go there on a gun round, there's an Opper there and you just die, right? Because when you take, there's nobody that's going to be perfectly consistent in straight up rifle duels. So you disincentivize them doing dry plays to counter your aggressive rifler. You disincentivize that so he can get aggressive at the right times and take plays. And that's what I feel like I'm missing from Ultimate. He's not doing these disincentivizing plays that allow his riflers to be aggressive in ways that their opponents can't just dry walk in and get trade on, you know? And I think that happens very often when you're looking at any aggression they're going for on CT side. Their opponents are just too enabled to get hyper aggressive in different ways and duel those riflers. And I think you had a good point, Harry. You don't want him to get neutered, right? You don't want him to get neutered like all these other Oppers have. They just turn into a support bot. That's the exact wrong play. But he has to, I think, pull it back a little bit. And the question I was thinking was like, is this because Twistzz is like a newer IGL? Is he just Ultimate goes, I want to go for this peak? And it's hard to say no when you don't have that much experience of like, well, no, I know better than you, by the way. Like, my Opper, you're doing what the fuck I say. You don't usually want to say that often, but like at the same time, does he just not say that? Or are they, yeah, you're right. Are they pushing him to do this? It's hard to say.
We've talked a lot about the individual players, their roles, kind of some of the problems between the players that we've seen, whether it's Twistzz system, YEKINDAR, Ultimate, their overall role balance.
Nobody blames Neff.
So, of course
that's the
not.
thing.
My God.
Because it's a negative Nancy podcast, so we just don't talk about Naff, who is still consistently so much better than everyone else who plays his roles. But he just deserves more. He always will.
I want to go to our last segment, which is, first we're going to read some, but we're going to, create our own HLTV thread here. Liquid fix. How do we fix Liquid? So first of all, I've pulled up some forum suggestions. So we're going to turn to some of the masterminds. Your first suggestion is minus YEKINDAR plus Perfecto or any other rifler. Twistzz IGL.
I don't know why Perfecto is at the top of that list.
Yeah, this is what they need. More anchors. More lurkers. Just have 4 lurkers.
Minus YEKINDAR plus Nexa. Let's do it.
It's this Cloud9 approach to team building. Just get all the anchors in. But I think JKS in-game leading. If Carrigan could make JKS a good pack rifler, then why can't Twistzz? Right? Maybe just swap him with YEKINDAR. Make YEKINDAR a passive lurker. Why not go full brain rot? But no, I don't think that's the one. I think you need one more for us.
All right, next up, we have minus Ultimate plus Xantares.
Twistzz Orfing? Twistzz Orf IGL?
This would be classic Liquid moment. This would be classic Liquid. Just throw Twistzz into the op roll, more aggressive riflers. T side use 5 rifle. I mean, that's pretty common. It's not worse than the last one.
Well, you can't hate it. You kind of can't hate it somehow.
I feel like Pets has suggested this one.
one.
This is the G2 approach to team building, which is more fraggers.
And then lastly, we have a minus YEKINDAR plus Elige.
I mean, do you know what? It feels good on paper, right? Because of the position overlap. It feels good because Elige is just a better player than 2024 YEKINDAR. But I don't think it solves the actual structural issue. I think if you turn Elige into your fucking full-on bomb site entry, he's not having a good time. He's just not having a good time on T-side at all. I think that would be awful. I think if you do that, you need another change.
What if we got Donk? You minus YEKINDAR plus Donk. That would solve all of the problems, right? We'd be good to go.
Yeah,
we'd be winning
fine.
every game.
With what money? This
is the problem, yeah, because it's any individual change I don't think fixes anything.
I think you too.
Let's hear your thread, Harry. And what is your liquid fix?
My liquid fix? Okay, so we've kind of alluded to it already. I think the Twistzz IGL experiment is something that should happen even later in his career. I know he's played loads and loads of maps, and that's maybe more important than age, but he's too young to be doing this for me. I think he's still got star player. So he's back in phase rolls. We're sticking Twistzz in phase rolls. We're signing HooXi for YEKINDAR, right? Because he's the best.
It's a big disagreement. A lot of people disagreed with this one.
Best free agent. I don't know. It's the thing. We've got the one fucking HooXi defender on. When we're supposed it's supposed to be a debate show, and you've got the one HooXi defender on. Well, two HooXi defenders. You get HooXi in game leading for YEKINDAR. Twistzz could go in like space taking roles. And I think the one thing that this team really lacks, and I was baffled when they signed JKS, I think that was a pure like vibes-based signing. I think they need an aggressive lurker because NAF is as good a passive lurker as you're probably going to get. I think someone like Nohte, someone who plays these lurk roles as a space taker, someone who will take spots like mid on Ancient and be amazing at that, and then also be your passive lurker on some maps as well. Someone who's flexible, someone who's got more like role compression, someone like JL, right? So JL could be a map control player for another team, but for Na'Vi, he's this super aggressive lurker, and it just works. You just need 2 aggressive riflers, 2 passive riflers. Like, it's tale as old as time. I think Twistzz thinks he can be the aggressive rifler, but I don't like Twistzz being the aggressive rifler. So my super team would be someone like Nohte. I think even like the out there suggestion would be like
how do we go from
like
fix
Kyosuke,
Liquid
right?
to make Liquid a super team?
It's always a super
Okay.
team. This is the one thing you've got to remember. Every time it's a roster move, it's a super team.
That's true.
I think you get, and you don't even need Nohte. Okay, I think Nohte is great. I think he's had a hard year because of things outside his control. But someone like Kyosuke, if you want to go full big dick swinging, we're going to spend £1 million on someone, then Kyosuke as your aggressive lurker would
the
also
fuck is
be
a
amazing.
quid?
Pant, Great British pant. Get that in. Someone like that. So aggressive lurker plus traditional IGL. Then you have Twistzz being your kind of like flex player, or like kind of still on map control a lot of the time as well. And then you have that balance there, and then NAF is just your stable anchor who is going to continue to be amazing. Like especially Anubis. I saw this one guy like I think he's called Brillo on YouTube. Just like, yeah, NAF has like a 1.4 rating on Anubis now. Okay, that's just a normal thing that happens.
I almost made a video on this. His Anubis is insane now.
Just the best V lurker in the world. Like he's just good on every map in his considering the positions
In the hardest
he plays.
fucking roles too. Like
Yes.
he just never fails. The fact that he's on like the best team in the world, dude, it's unbelievable. He's so in unreasonably good, dude.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like some teams have bad anchors as well. Like it's just like Vitality with Mezzi. Like I love Mezzi. I'll bat for Mezzi, but he's not an anchor. He's not a natural anchor. Like he's having to learn that in Vitality. And then Daf is just right here, just chilling in like a terrible team. Not a terrible team. You know what I mean? He was in a terrible team when they signed Mezzi. So I think NAF is underutilized, and I just think JKS is too similar to NAF. I think you need a much more aggressive lurker, and I'd suggest Nohte for that. I think Nohte was a feasible signing when they got JKS, probably.
All right,
Vu, let's hear you.
let me give you an anti-roll cell opinion. And I think the HooXi pickup is kind of anti-roll cell because I think I've seen arguments against a HooXi pickup because the roles don't really make sense, and I think you could argue that either way, but because I was thinking just like fuck JKS, just picks up HooXi and have HooXi, he can create like some space for YEKINDAR to not be aggressive every round, because to some extent I really do feel like YEKINDAR just lost confidence. Like now he has to get aggressive so often, he just loses duels and he's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna die anyways, we're just going in, like we'll just do it. I just like, whatever, like that kind of feels like it. But instead of saying, because I would honestly, it might even be worse, but fuck it, I would say minus JKS plus HooXi would be better than JKS. I don't think it would make them a top 3 team, but I think what I would want is the HooXi to show them how to play the game the right way, in my opinion, and then just go from there. Maybe you cut HooXi when you have someone better. But I'm known as the biggest gla1ve hater, but pick up fucking gla1ve, dude. Just pick up gla1ve. That would be I'm like, if I'm thinking one change minus, it's myth or coaching, right?
Yep.
Get kassad and get gla1ve. This is the hottest take I've ever put out in my entire life.
Justify this take.
That's such a rogue, like Like, actually crazy suggestion. Because like gla1ve and Kuban was just an absolute car crash.
Oh, kassad, yeah.
This
I
is,
feel like
this is
gla1ve-
like the forum thread that you post, and then the first comment below it is like the purple +1s, which is like, what the fuck are you talking?
This is a true HLTV forum take. I've really gotten into the mentality. Look, I just think, I mean, I've said it from the start. I've actually had a very static line, in my opinion, on the team. I think strategically they don't play right. And I think gla1ve may have had problems. He's had problems in CS2, but if we look at the team that he did well with, it's a team that had a lot of really strong fraggers, and he was able to kind of pull that together. I think other teams have kind of maybe struggled with that a little bit. I think if you gave him Liquid with players like Naf and Twistzz, and maybe, look, I'm not out on YEKINDAR. I think YEKINDAR still has the potential, but I think he's lost confidence at some point, and so he looks fucking terrible. But I think he has the potential, and you could bring him back. And you'd have to juggle some things around. Yes, okay, it wouldn't be fucking flawlessly optimal, but then you
Honestly,
think about
it'd be
removing YEKINDAR a few months later. And the reason I put kassad is because just how bad it went with kassad, I feel like kassad would be, because I've heard him talk, like Smooya talked about kassad one time, and he's like, it was a story Smooya looked back on fondly, where he was in practice and he went for a play and kassad's like, that's the dumbest play ever, you're a fucking idiot, don't make that play. And Smooya was like, no, fuck you, that was totally right. And then he's like, but I looked back the next day and kassad was completely right, and I accepted it, right? And it's like, kassad will be like, fuck you, this is how it's done, you're doing it this way. And with how it went with kassad, it sounded like they might have needed that type of coach, which is just like, fuck you, we're doing it, but maybe that would actually just implode the whole team. Boomer.
To be fair,
bust,
Myther wasn't
whatever.
there with the Cadian lineup, so
Yeah, fair. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I actually don't have any problem with Myther. It seems like he has done a pretty solid job. I'm just thinking, I thought HLTV post. I was thinking, you could keep the coach, just get gla1ve. I would honestly minus JKS plus gla1ve and then reconsider YEKINDAR, even though the roles don't make that much sense. I want
I think
an
they do
IGL
because
that
it's
has
it's
a
just
plan.
Twistzz in phase roles. Like
Yeah.
that's the roles are literally fine if you put an IGL in for JKS. Like it would be fine.
it's funny too because my two thoughts was HooXi or gla1ve for JKS just because it would make more sense. Now
What's this
I didn't
YEKINDAR
have
glazing,
some wild
man?
coach. I just didn't have some wild coach change to make it a real HLTV thread. But I think those two as leadership changes make sense. They both have the kind of experience that this team would benefit massively from and provide that structure. But
And gla1ve would get the respect. I think that's the big thing.
Yes.
Liquid has been smacked down by Astralis so many times that they would just be like, yes, daddy gla1ve, we'll do whatever you want.
But I like the gla1ve show as well. But I think I would still rather get like that aggressive lurker in at the same time as gla1ve, because I think Twistzz and YEKINDAR are very, very vocal players about like system and everything. And it's okay to maybe have two of those players. I think three of them would be too vocal. And I think we've seen enough from YEKINDAR in CS2 now that maybe he just needs like a different project, honestly,
That's
to
the
get
smart-
back. Because
like,
his
you've got
pre-aim
the
is just
smart move,
bad
yeah.
now, right? His pre-aim
Yeah.
is just bad. Like he is just not the same player. Like he was always quite dependent on his first bullet from when I watched him. And yes, his T-side job now is hard, but the confidence is completely gone. He just jumps around corners. Like there's selfless entering and then there's like selfless entering. Like we've established that like a player like Donk can bomb site entry quite often. Like I don't think he does it as much as people say he does. Like I think the other riflers still do it when it's not advantageous. But YEKINDAR should be a space taker more than a bomb site entry, honestly. And yes, an IGL would fix that, but I don't think he's good enough for these roles. These are the roles that our best riflers play these days. The best riflers are space takers these days.
hear me
And
out.
then they have
Minus
YEKINDAR in it.
YEKINDAR plus Lake.
Plus late.
Oh, what, to keep the
Plus
NA spot?
Lake.
Oh, this is the one thing I also hate about this fucking team is they're the global flag to try and scam the RMRs. Like, just grow up and get through the EU RMRs. You don't need to pick up JKS or Heavy God or someone. Just pick up a good aggressive lurker. And by the way, Nertz is Israeli, so they could continue doing that nonsense. I've seen some people say this is full HLTV forum brain, but because Mao's had like one bad event, it's like they're going to break up at the end of the year. And Xerxes would be great for YEKINDAR if you get an in-game leader at the same time. like in-game leader for JKS, and then YEKINDAR, and then Zacian, and Twistzz back to
but
phase rolls.
this feels like dream scenario, like unbelievable, unreasonable dream
got money.
scenario is like Zacian and gla1ve. By the way, I'm looking at my spreadsheet from before. HooXi literally on T side on gun rounds when I did my spreadsheet. Harry, you might be able to look at this now. Better than YEKINDAR. More kills per round than YEKINDAR. Better KD than YEKINDAR. T side HooXi. And that's why I would have been down with minus fucking YEKINDAR plus HooXi, because if you're gonna have a guy suicide in, why not have it be your IGL?
Yeah, because Twistzz clearly likes these roles. Like, I think it would be fine to have Twistzz still and do that 1-for-1 of like someone who won't frag. Like, that's the one thing with HooXi is, I think we've seen it with Snacks as well, is like, I can't believe they did that. Well, but I mean, that's another episode. But I do think it's hard to kind of hide your in-game leader in these anchor spots. I think there's a reason a lot of these teams are having more fluid rotating in-game leaders, because you could just down club bomb sites if you know you're running into HooXi or Snacks, unless you have the like simple Zeus thing. So I think maybe that'd be a bit weaker. But gla1ve's more
I'm
of a
not
fragger.
convinced on that, by the way, because I did the stats on how often do teams hit B on Mirage against Kerrigan. It was exactly the same as fucking every other player. Like, it wasn't that much higher, because I think they cover for him. They bring oppers over, they give him the op, they give him an AUG, they cover for him correctly. I think if you had like Kerrigan without that, then they would hit him all the time. I think going back to the op thing, I'm a broken fucking record, but going back to the op thing, when you cover for your weak players, I think it's hard to exploit that. But sorry, I didn't want to cut you off too much.
No, you're good. I was just saying, like, I just don't see a way for YEKINDAR to get back to his form, and I think the space taking role is too important. Like, I think you could have Twistzz in some of these positions and him be a very intelligent space creator. I just think you need someone who's going to be that entry, like the bomb site entry, to free Twistzz up. I don't like YEKINDAR doing it. I'd rather have an in-game leader doing it, because then Twistzz is going to be a better trade fragger, because he can focus
He does it
on that
alone
more.
too often, in my opinion, too. Like, I see him run up banana alone. I see him like do all these plays alone that, like, usually you have like someone like Twistzz you might have doing something alone, because the point is you're setting him up with utility to make it likely. Like, that's what gets Donk a lot of kills. He goes for aggressive plays, but it's like he's alone because you're getting ahead of their counter utility and you're sending him in spots where he's likely to take a 50-50 duel and win it. And you do that with YEKINDAR and he loses it, and it's like, well, fuck. Like, I would honestly rather have like Twistzz do that, because maybe he dies, but at least then you have a better chance of getting that kill. And YEKINDAR is taking some of those and just doing very bad. But at the same time, when I did my sheet also, YEKINDAR on gun rounds was like fucking, on T-side gun rounds, 43% first kill, first death. That is unfucking heard of. That is like, Donk was at 40 and everyone else was like max 30, mostly in like the high 20s, the people you think of as aggressive. Like, it's like, you can't have, that's why I didn't want Twistzz IGLing, because if he thinks that's acceptable, I don't think a team could be top 3 with that. Maybe it's changed though. I don't know. You can tell me later, Harry. You can pop it up on the screen and post if you want.
All right. Well, I feel like, 15 to 20 minutes of exposure to HLTV forums is, toxic to anybody. So to bring this all together, we've obviously talked a lot about the team's, role issues, some of the possible changes they could make now. I just wanted to touch on this last little bit of the year for them before we wrap up, going into, the RMR. Just your guys' thoughts on it and, final comments around Liquid.
About the RMR, I wanted to say that Liquid might bomb out of the RMR, but they're too good, dude. Like, any of these teams, maybe they could lose the Furia, maybe they could lose the Complexity, but it's just like, they're just better. They're so much better individually.
If it was the old garbage RMR format where you somehow lose two, like a best of 1 and a best of 3 in the Americas and you're out, then maybe if they just got really shitty matches, but not now that there's actually 7 teams going.
Yeah,
through.
just individually, they're just too much better. The strategical flaws aren't going to matter when they're playing M80. This one's gonna get clipped. M80 or Imperial or 9Z, I don't think it matters. Maybe 9Z, but against most of these teams, I don't think it matters. But inter-regional matchups are always a little off, a little hard to define. Also, I think the problem is that if Twistzz continues, as you guys said, I didn't even know his stats are like that bad in the last little bit, like under 1.0 rating.
CT side he's good. T side he's dropped off.
That seems to be like all of Liquid. The problem is it's always going to be in the back of his head. I don't think he's ever going to be fully bought into IGLing until he's just not the same player he is currently, because it's always going to be like, why am I doing this? I could just be a star player, and star players are worth more. They have more bargaining power. They have more everything. Why would you want to be an IGL if you could be a star player? So he's just, I think realistically, if his fragging goes down enough, he's going to be like, well, let's just practice more and IGL less hard. I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but that would be fairly likely in my mind,
Harry, any parting words for the first inaugural, X Fans Come Here podcast?
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end it on. I think it should be a fun podcast in the future as well. I think we're going to try and keep getting these kind of demo Hoover guests like Vu, who can come in over there.
You got to get people to disagree with you a little bit more, though. You got to get Maui Snake in here. Maybe. He would have hated on that HooXi take so hard.
Yeah. So, try and find people who, don't bag the wrong horse all the time, like us two. But yeah, I think it should be fun. I agree with you a lot on a lot of Liquid. I think it's a lot of similar issues, but maybe that just means we're both right. Maybe it just means we've both looked into it in different ways.
They're going to go win Blast
and
World
if we can
Final,
come to the same conclusion, it's fine. No, we just won't release it if they win. It's fine. So yeah, no, it's been fun. So hopefully many more in the future.